Hello and welcome to episode 1 of LA Meekly, the podcast.
I'm sorry. Are you Daniel Zaffron?
Yeah.
Oh, perfect. Will you sign this for me? Sign this right next to Mike. I love your whatever it's called podcast.
It's the first episode. I'm not even famous yet.
This is LA. It doesn't matter. Just sign it. Sign it right next to the microphone for me. Is this thing on?
No,
Hey.
go away.
Oh, look at this thing.
Get back off my microphone.
Hello. Are we
Wait! Do you want to be on a podcast?
Do I?
Well, then pull up a chair and let us begin
Yeah.
episode 1 of LA Meekly, the podcast. All right, thank you to Alberto Sistos for helping out with our theme for the moment. This is episode 1 of LA Meekly, the podcast, and just to explain what this is going to be, it's going to be just sort of a history lesson, an extensive history lesson about different aspects of LA that interest us or are researchable.
We have a long list of stuff that we find interesting, and we'll just delve into everything.
Yeah, well, not everything.
Pretty much just Google everything and then read it on the podcast.
None of these are cited. To explain who I am, I'm Daniel Zaffron.
Hi, Daniel.
Hello. I am from Granada Hills in the Valley.
What valley?
The Valley.
You know the valley. You know the one.
We all know the one.
San Fernando Valley, which is very specific.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's not-
We
don't need to talk about the other
valleys.
Right ahead of me is...
I'm Greg Gonzalez. I was born in the real LA, East LA, and then I moved to Echo Park, and I've been slumming it there ever since.
Nobody cares. So for the first episode, what better way to start off than to examine where knowledge is born? The Los Angeles Public Library System.
It was very strange looking up the library from the library because they don't have a lot of stuff on themselves, which I thought was really weird.
They're so modest.
Yeah, for a lot of research, I had to go to the central library itself, and they just had like a manila folder of everything they've saved throughout the years.
Yeah.
It was couldn't take it home.
No, they wouldn't let me leave the desk, and they were watching me the whole time when I was going through it all.
They took my ID and they laughed at my picture as I walked away.
I was just standing there calling back to my girlfriend. Can you believe that there's over 300 books in 1840?
I found a lot of pamphlets that I thought were really funny from like the 60s of like the bookmobile and just like little things. We now have like computers where you can look up like, it was like the first catalog on a computer that they were so like, this is the future, we've made it. I thought that the person, whoever like had a hand type each catalog card and then put them through the rack, and then someone came up with a computer system, must have been pissed.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about our relationship with the library, the public library system, and libraries in general.
Right.
I can't seem to get away from working in the public library or in a library. I spent 3 years at the Mid-Valley Library, and then I left, and then I ended up at the Cal State Northridge Library, and then I left.
Yes.
And then I ended up back at the Los Angeles Public Library.
How do you feel about libraries in general?
Next topic.
I remember the first library I went to was the Anthony Quinn Library in East LA, which is still up. They just wrote an LA Times article about it not too long ago, how it's has a lot of film memorabilia there. And I saw Gregory Peck read The Raven at the Mark Taper Auditorium at Central Library. For high school, we had a really small school, which is in the outskirts of downtown, and there wasn't enough room, so they would ship us to Central Library at 8 in the morning, which is before the bums come in. So we were there before the homeless would be in there. And then we would some classes we'd do work, but others they would just unleash us at the library. So I had a pretty good relationship, and now I'm in library school because I want to be an archivist if everything else doesn't work out.
Well, judging by the way things are going, they are not going.
I will be an archivist.
So look for him in your local archive in that 5 years.
Crying like every
Archiving his tears.
balding, bearded man goes.
Okay, so episode 1, and
Start it off.
let's begin with the history.
I'm going to give you a year, which the library started, and you just run off from there. How about that?
Your year, what you say is the beginning of the library system, I challenge.
Oh.
Give me a year.
1872.
Idiot.
Please tell me more.
Well, it started unofficially in 1844.
Wow.
It was not yet sort of a library, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
That's when there were less than 1,500 people living in Los Angeles. And it basically was just a bunch of donated books and old magazines. And throughout the years, it kept changing and growing. And
Along with the city.
Along with the city.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. Trains started rolling by. What did I read LA was big for before it was a metropolitan city? It was like
Oranges.
oil. Oil and oranges.
Throughout the years, the library kept changing, and as the collection grew, they just kept growing too big for their britches.
Now, what do you do with all those books, really? Nobody knew how to read.
And what do you do with all those ripped britches? The overall themes, it seems, of the library I wrote down here is budget cuts and there isn't enough room.
Yeah, I have a mountain of research that could support both those things. And sassy women.
Yes, sassy. Oh my God.
God, so many sassy women.
As you said, the library officially started in 1872 in a ceremony held in the Merced Theater.
Merced is no longer there. It was demolished 1 year after that meeting took place.
Really?
And they don't even have, even people in 1897 had already forgotten what it looked like.
Huh.
I wish they told me that before I started trying to research it.
Before you started interviewing people from 1897.
You tell me about the Merced! I even went to Merced, California. They didn't know anything either.
Get out of here. So Governor Downey was there presiding over it all. And the official date that the doors were open to the public was January 1st, 1873, with a grand total of 800 books on the shelves that were mostly loaned by citizens.
Really?
Membership cost $5 a month, or you could buy a lifetime membership for $50, one-time fee. It was originally called the Los Angeles Library Association, which was changed to the Los Angeles Public Library in 1878, and it was located on the Downey Block, which was basically sort of a collection of department stores or just various stores and saloons that was located on Spring and Temple.
Yeah. I found a picture of it, too.
Yeah. We hopefully will have some sort of a website where you can look at it.
If not, just try to picture it. Downey Block, Spring and Temple.
You get the
all
gist.
old-timey. Everything was sepia. I thought I was going to blow your mind with knowing who John Downey was, because he was the 7th governor of LA from 1860 to 1862. But you knew that already. Because
I didn't know that much about him.
That's all
I thought his first name was Governor.
Which was a proper name at the time, which is how many so many people got elected is what I'm saying. So.
There's a governor on every block.
His name's Governor, just let him sit there.
In this time period, this sort of a location above of saloons and department stores was typical for libraries.
Right.
And that actually influenced the way libraries are now arranged, sort of because department stores have, the health department, the clothing department, and now libraries have the science fiction department, the literature department, the nonfiction department. Basically different departments for different genres and subjects. The first city librarian was John C. Littlefield.
Right.
And when its doors were first opened, women were excluded from using it.
That would change very soon.
Within 6 months, they were allowed to use their male relatives' cards. In 1876, a ladies' room that had no books in it, but it had magazines and sofas.
A little bit about Littlefield. He started, like you said, in 1872. He got paid $75 per month, which soon became $100. And he was in publishing. He was the editor of the LA Weekly Express. He set up a lot of library facilities through fundraising and donations. He doubled the holdings really quickly. He put together the first catalog. I didn't look up what JC meant, though.
It's John. Jesus Christ, Littlefield. By the middle, I can't think of a better term. By the middle of his reign, in 1875, there were 350 members of the library.
Right.
The cost of membership he changed to $2.50, and then 50 cents per month in dues.
Okay.
So $2.50 to join, and then 50 cents every month for dues. Or $5 a year if you paid it in advance. The way it worked then was you could only check out one big book at a time or 2 small books at a time. The books could be out 2 weeks and renewed once, and new books could only be out 1 week, which shocked me because nothing has changed in over 100 years. And the fines at that time were 5 cents a day for the big books, 3 cents for the small books. He also set up a smoking room. He was replaced in 1879, which I heard was because he smoked Jimsum weed because he had really bad asthma and it smelled horrible.
Oh, okay.
So they fired him, naturally.
Naturally.
And he was replaced by Patrick Connolly, who was constantly drunk
Okay.
Yeah.
I read in some old material that went over the librarians, and it was very polite because it was written by the library. When it referred to Pat Connolly's alcoholism, it said a weakness, a periodic weakness that kept him absent from a lot of library events, and they had to let him go. No mention of his alcohol, but they mentioned several times that he was Irish. I think they implied it.
That was code back then. So he lasted only a year before being replaced. Oh, what?
Before you get to the big one,
Yeah.
I also read something funny enough. He was at the same time the president of the Catholic Abstinence Society here in LA.
That is, he was a man of contradictions.
Mm-hmm. Isn't it ironic?
Did you call him Irish? I think you called him Irish. So he lasted only a year before the first big person in the library came in.
Monumental, not big.
Yeah, she was small. This was Mary Emily Foy in 1880. She was the first woman to work for the library at age 18. She was the library's first true innovator. Her hiring was the beginning of an era in library history from 1880 to 1905 when city librarians who were women really took control and boosted the reputation of the whole library system. I know you have some stuff to say about this, but the job attracted women because at the time they weren't allowed to have most government jobs, so they went to the one place in the government where they were allowed to try to make a difference, which was the library.
Yeah, and it also drew a lot of progressive women there. Women who already could read and they already had positions of power, or not power, but they were working already.
Yeah.
So when they came there, they already had a lot of experience. So when they got in the library system, they just moved it full force forward because a lot of women were working the library. Men had administrative jobs, but a lot of women were working the library itself.
Yeah.
Before she came along, the library was like a parlor for men, like you mentioned. Like they had the smoking room. They also had a room for like checkers and chess. It was just kind of like a hangout spot with books. And when she came in, she got rid of the checkers and chess, which was very controversial at the time. And right.
I actually read that she would referee chess games.
Oh, is that maybe I'm thinking of Tessa Kelso already?
You might be because she
seems
spoiler alert. She
alert.
Comes up a little bit later. And you were saying that now it's still, because of that early sort of dominance they had in the library, it's still kind of women heavy.
It's very feminine. The pioneers of the library were not girls who would be easily stepped over. Like they were women who put up fights when you try to take them out of the library.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that must be where the whole stereotype of the mousy woman who works in the library.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a well-established stereotype where it has deep roots, and it starts with Mary Foy.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
She was later nicknamed Miss Los Angeles because of her credentials, which I will list to you right now.
Please do.
Vice President of the Political Equality League, Secretary of the Votes for the Women Club, President of the California Women's Democratic League, a delegate to the Democratic National Convention in 1916 and 1920. She helped organize the California Parlor of the Native Daughters of the American West. She wrote for several LA newspapers and ran for Congress in 1934, but lost.
Massive career.
Yeah.
Yeah. She was not lazy.
Yeah, and a really long career from 1880 to 1934.
And even when she was ousted from the library, she continued to do things like that. She never went back to the library, but she continued to work in public eye for very important causes like that.
So for the library, Mary Foy is the one who brought the actual Dewey Decimal System into the library.
I read that, but I also read it was Kelso as well, so I don't know which one is true or not, because I read both have done the same thing. With Mary Foy, she would have to be incredibly progressive because it was very new at the time. It was about 4 years old. So if Foy did it, she must have had incredible foresight and... Foresight, if you will.
I don't get it.
Get out. But, I mean, both are possible. I mean, it had been out, but it was incredibly new at the time.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't put it past her to try something out so new. So I also have that she would referee chess games held in the library, and she would settle bets in one of the saloons downstairs. She was only 18. I don't know what she was doing in that saloon.
In 1872, the population of LA was about 6,000. When Mary Foy jumps in, it's 11,000. So she's at a time in LA when it's growing. It's growing very fast. That's only, 8 years, and it grows that much? Like you mentioned, she was very young when she took the position. She died in 1962. So she watched it become a sleepy Pueblo town, and she watched it become the third largest city in America. She was there for all of that.
That's why she was Miss Los Angeles.
They crowned her, right?
Yeah.
They give her a crown.
But they don't give crowns to Miss. They give her a tiara. After Mary Foy, there was a period of relative quiet for the library as someone named Jessie Gavitt took over as city librarian from 1884 to 1889.
She didn't work a library before that. At the time, it was very common to give positions like that to people who needed it, and she was one of those people who needed it. So they took Mary Foy out, which she was very upset about, but they gave it to Gavitt, whose father had died recently. He was a widower and he had kids. She was one of those kids. So she just needed the money, so they just gave it to her. They think that it might have been a political pay at some point, but didn't read if she had any like power of her own. But she didn't do like a horrible job. It was just kind of a lull.
She kept it going for the next person who can actually make a difference.
And she did make a huge difference.
Well, there's actually someone in between. After Jessie Gavitt is someone named Lydia Prescott, who only was there for 1 year in 1889.
Okay.
And then
was she a drunk too?
She must have been. And after that quiet time was over, when the next massive figure, again, massive, not in size,
landmark, career-wise massive.
Yeah. Tessa Kelso took the helm for her reign.
Another reign. A lot of reigns in this one. Yeah.
From 1889 to 1895. This was another really cool woman who, in the 1890s, mind you, she was smoking cigarettes in public and she had short hair. And one time she fought off a clergyman's attempt to get a racy French novel removed from her shelves.
A little bit more on that, which is very interesting. Sorry, but we'll get on that.
No, tell me.
So she has her career, which we'll talk about right now. But she didn't fight it off necessarily, like physically fight. It was Reverend, I believe, Campbell of the First Methodist Church. He condemned Kelso's character for approving that acquisition of its... I don't know how to say it. You went to France. You could read it.
Jean Richepin Le Cadet.
He did not... it was a very controversial book at the time, apparently. And he was condemning her for accepting that into the library system. So he was just going in front of his audience and denouncing her. And she sued him and won for slander, basically. So a reverend went up, and then she won the suit with that. She also, at the same time, was in another lawsuit with somebody. It was a city auditor, and he didn't think that she should be reimbursed her money for going to the American Library Association meeting in Chicago. It was like $200, and he thought that she shouldn't get that back, and she shouldn't have done that. She won that suit because basically the public said, yeah, you don't get to say what she does with our money. So she won 2 suits at the same time. Wow. But that's on her way out, actually. Those were 2 things that actually... those are 2 things that led to her character coming into question.
Yeah, we'll get into that.
Let's talk about all the good stuff she did first.
Yeah, let's not talk about her horrible character.
No.
She significantly boosted the scope and size of the LAPL. That stands for Los Angeles Public Library.
One more time?
LAPL.
Before we get into library stuff, let's just mention that she came from the publishing world too. She was a very successful newspaperwoman and publicist.
So she did several things. First off, in her first year, 1889, the collection had grown to 6,000 volumes, and there was no longer enough space in the Downey block where they were, so the library moved out of their headquarters and relocated to the 3rd floor of City Hall. But the old City Hall, which is now the Los Angeles Times building.
Yeah, which is incredibly... it's got a lot more size than City Hall. City Hall's skinny. LA Times is fat. Yeah. It's right there in Spring and Temple, and it takes up the entire block. It goes from First Street to Temple.
There's even a little plaque there if you want to read. Go down there.
Can we go now?
Read a little plaque.
Can we go now?
Let's bring this down to the plaque.
Let's take this thing on the road.
She started the first library training classes, and she also started the book delivery system to get books sent out to people who didn't necessarily live near the library, the central library.
The 2 locations I have, first one was Boyle Heights. Boyle Heights is actually kind of close to downtown. It's like right over the river.
We'll get more into that.
And then a year later, she established one on University Avenue, which is East LA, which is a little further. And then Angelino Heights is just right around the corner. It's up Temple.
But also bear in mind, this was 1890-something.
That would have taken a year to walk from Beaudry.
You could have gotten 4 different plagues on the way from Downey, or from Boyle Heights to the library. One of the biggest things she did was she abolished the membership fees in 1891, and she made it free for the first time in LAPL history, which has never changed. During her time there, she increased the number of books the library had. Mind you, it started at 6,000 when she came in. She increased it to 42,000. And when she started the job, there were 132 library cards issued in the whole city, and when she left, there were 20,000.
She had an assistant, a library assistant named Adelaide Hess, is it? Hasse? And the two of them were actually very tight. When the board starts fighting her over the two lawsuits, basically, and there's other stuff going on too, but I think they're just trying to get her out of there because I think they wanted to get a male in there, which they don't do until, like 2 librarians later. It's a whiles away. But her and her library assistant resigned at the same time over all this stuff that's happening. It's a lot of heat on her because of the 2 lawsuits. The conditions in the library are actually starting to get a lot worse because they're so cramped. They've just moved from Downey Block to City Hall, and everything's just cramped. The working conditions are really hard. A lot of employees are unhappy, and they're unhappy at her. So she resigns. The board asks her not to resign, to take back her resignation along with her assistant, which she does. They cancel their resignation, and then they scratch that ever happened from the records. But then the next meeting, they had to account for those missing minutes. And there was a gentleman by the name of Frank Flint who just introduced the idea of dropping their salary, and then everyone just approved. So they resigned.
There's budget cuts.
Budget cuts. There's a budget cut for you. And then after that, they move on with their careers. Kelso never goes back to the library, I believe, but she continues.
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah, and then I think the library assistant, though, stays in a little bit longer. She becomes librarian, but not for the LAPL, for I believe either university or one of the counties.
Yeah, see, the library just chews people up. It just spits them out once they're done with you.
No matter how good and progressive you are.
After her, 2 other women took charge of the library in the forms of Clara Fowler from 1895 to 1897. Do you have anything about her?
Nothing on Fowler.
I don't have anything about her either. And then the person after that was Harriet Child Wadley.
Wadley?
1897 to 1900. And it doesn't seem like much happened with these 2 people.
Yeah.
The significant occurrence during Wadley's term was the creation of the first library satellite being open in the form of the reading room and delivery station at the Boyle Heights Library Association, which started in 1889. It started in 1889 as its own endeavor, as its own sort of thing, but it was annexed eventually into the library system, the LAPL library system, in 1899. And then it wasn't until 1910 it was rebranded as the Boyle Heights Station, which was the first branch library system. Right. And also, a little side note.
Please.
All of the libraries, there's 72 branch libraries and then the central one in the LAPL system, and they all have a number. So Boyle Heights is number 1. So the numbers will tell you in what order they were all brought into the system.
That's pretty neat.
So I think Silver Lake is the most recent one.
It is, yeah, and it's a beautiful library. They have everything. All the DVDs are Criterion.
Yeah, that's how you know.
That's how you know you got quality. Before we continue, do you have a favorite branch library?
Favorite branch? I'm just too close to all of them. I just love them all so much. I don't like the Hollywood libraries because it scares me. But there's so much cool Hollywood stuff. Like there's this special room that you can go into that I went into once that has like just filing cabinets full of like old Hollywood like the little paper you'd get at the premiere of Citizen Kane.
Oh, really?
And they have like autographs of Woody Allen. And,
I really like that one.
Yeah. What's your favorite one?
Oh my God, you're gonna ask me that. There's I forgot which one it is. It's on Alvarado in MacArthur Park. I don't know what branch that is, but
I think it's MacArthur.
Might be the MacArthur Park?
Maybe.
I don't know. But I really like that branch, whatever it is. It's just very old. Oh, and the Wilshire branch too.
I haven't been to that one.
That one is in Koreatown. It's very nice looking, and it's a very old alley room.
I like the old ones.
Yeah, me too. I like the old ones.
Yeah.
Yeah. Encino Tarzana one with the sharp edge. I don't like that.
I don't like it for other reasons. As the city of Los Angeles continued to grow, the city started to take over the neighboring regions. So, because the city itself was downtown, that was Los Angeles, and that was pretty much its own city. And then there was Hollywood, which was its own city, and like Eagle Rock, which was its own city.
Right.
And eventually, Los Angeles started to mold in Hollywood and Eagle Rock, like the Blob.
Yeah, just like the Blob.
That's where the movie came from. That's what it's based on.
It had political implications, socio-political implications.
Eventually, they started taking in all these other areas of Los Angeles, and they would mold them back into the greater city that is now Los Angeles. And as this happened, the libraries that had already been established in all of these areas, they got absorbed into the LAPL system as well.
A note on that, they didn't know that the city was going to grow the way it did, which is what you just mentioned. The suburban sprawl. We're going to try to separate and go to Glendale. We're going to become San Fernando Valley, but LA County just absorbs everything.
Yeah. It just kept spreading, and
by 1900, I have the population as 100,000 here
in all of Los Angeles.
Yeah, in LA. Yeah.
Wow,
it's big.
That's a big growth.
That's a big growth. They should get that checked out. Can we talk about Mary Jones now?
I still have more.
Oh, okay. Hit me with it.
Well, it's coming though. Actually, no. It's here.
Do we have similar notes? Is she coming?
I think she's scheduled to make an appearance.
God, if we had somebody walk in, pretend to be Mary Jones, I'd be so happy.
Hello. At this point, this is when the reign of women ended, and it ended on a sour note. So the last sort of great woman librarian was Mary Jones, and she was city librarian from 1900 to 1905. Despite being the first city librarian in LA to actually have attended library school, she was fired in 1905 to make way for a man to have her job.
Mr.
Of
Lummis.
course. During this time, the library funding was given 4 mills on each dollar of taxable property that the city collected, and this is today pretty much the equivalent of 4/10 of a cent.
Wow.
What do you have about Mary Jones?
She was really big on children's services, and she really wanted to make sure that access and use, all that stuff was available for children. She had the library open every day but Christmas, and she also lowered the minimum age requirements for checkout from 12 to 10, which increased library usage.
All those protests.
They were working the mines. They wanted to read.
They just wanted to relax at the end of the day.
She also aided in getting LAPL to participate in the National Cataloging Network, which was trying to build a union catalog for the entire country. And then, like you mentioned before, she had been big on getting these remote libraries becoming part of the LA system. So they were reading rooms, and because of the cramped conditions, she helped turn them into full-fledged libraries.
Yeah.
Branches, I mean.
The library was so progressive. They wanted children to be educated. They wanted, it was free knowledge.
They were free knowledge, yeah. They made sure that it was free to everybody. They made sure everyone had access to everything, and it was open to everybody, open every day.
Yeah.
And it also, because of their library training program, was getting people jobs as well, especially women. It was making sure women were employed at the turn of the century, which was really important.
And nobody cares about the library. When
she tried to quit, she didn't try to quit. When they tried to kick her out to give Lummis, it didn't happen right away.
Yeah, it was dirty.
Yeah, it was a dirty fight, and she got a bunch of women. She got public sympathy first, and they totally agreed with her decision to want to stay. They didn't want her to be out as the librarian. She was portrayed in the press as charmingly defiant. She got a lot of women organizations like the Friday Morning Club to kind of help her out. And at some point I was reading, it was either her or her library assistant, Celia Gleason, mentioned that everyone on the board who wanted her out should be fired. And when the heat got on the board, the mayor fires all the board members who were against Jones except Willoughby Rodman, who supported Jones. And then after a month-long intervention from the city council, they said it was just cause, so they got rid of Jones, and then Lummis steps in.
Yeah, there was a lot of bad blood here.
There's a lot of bad
at the end of the reign of women.
A lot. I think it was, I forget. There was a female writer who was on board with Jones, and she was saying as long as men are in administrative positions, women are always going to be fighting. It's always going to be a gender fight between library workers who run the libraries and administrative people who look over everything. Yeah, and it's very gender oriented.
When she left in
1905.
Later on, in 1913, she crossed over to the dark side and joined the LA County Library, which was recently formed that year.
Oh, is that right?
Recently before that year.
I read also that at some point she had to get a job, and her supervisor was her once assistant, Celia Gleason. So that's how she got. Not that that's how she got the job, but once again they joined forces once more. Oh, is that cute?
Yeah,
that's so cute. Nice. They should make a movie about it, and it should star us.
Okay, so after this whole debacle and the reign of women was ended, the person that the city chose to replace Jones was Charles Fletcher Lummis, who took over from 1905 to 1910. And by the time Lummis took over in 1905, the LAPL was one of the most progressive libraries in the U.S. with its large collection and various outreach programs, and the fact that it was also geared toward having materials for children. And all this progressive forward thinking was entirely due to the women who were in charge of the library in those early years. It was this exact progressive thinking was also the reason why none of these women's jobs lasted very long.
If you think about the services that libraries provide, they are very nurturing, and men are incapable of being that nurturing.
It's the city's mom.
It's the city's mom, exactly. It's the city's mom. It's very well put.
Yeah.
Lummis, all I have, I have a little bit, but
I have a lot about him.
He's when I looked him up, when I crossed his name in the article, which was about the progressive women of the library system, it kind of ends with Lummis. It doesn't really go into
Looming over.
Hate you. A known flamboyant and noted man of letters is how it referred to him.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
I didn't say it.
So during Lummis's time, the library relocated twice to accommodate the growing collection.
Right.
And the first time was in 1906, when the collection reached 120,000 volumes. It moved to the Laughlin block, which is right where the Grand Central Market and the Bradbury Building are right now.
Yeah.
After that, they went to the third floor of the Hamburger Department Store, which was at 801 South Broadway. It's now the Broadway Trade Center, and they moved there in 1908.
Okay.
Lummis was an historian, an explorer, and yet another colorful character in library history, who he literally walked from Ohio to Los Angeles on his feet on a dare. That's how he came. That's how he got here.
That's pretty flamboyant. It reminds me of what I noted here. His former classmate at Harvard was Theodore Roosevelt, very similar in will.
There's actually a thing. We went. Me and my girlfriend were at the library, and they had on display this collection because he would try to get famous people's autographs or just connections with famous people.
Yeah.
And there's a letter on display from Theodore Roosevelt saying your library is great. And there's a picture of him also walking around with Theodore Roosevelt.
Chucky?
Yeah.
That's what Theodore used to call him Chucky.
Yeah.
Teddy? Yeah, Teddy used to call him Chucky.
Yeah, so there's a lot, he in the special collections, they have a lot of, the things, the old letters that really famous people and powerful people had sent to him.
That's interesting.
Because he wanted to try to get, notoriety for the library. Another thing he would do, he would put labels that said poison onto historical romance novels because he felt them overwrought and dubious. And he also kept a diary where he bragged about his performance in bed with his wife and people who weren't his wife.
Is that on display in the special collections?
It's in the kids section.
It's mostly pictures. Who writes letters like that? Who keeps note of that?
A lunatic who walks from Ohio to Los Angeles. He was also annoyed by all the book theft that was constantly happening. So he created the branding system that the library used, but he would literally burn the words LA Pub Library onto the top leaves of the books, and that's an idea he got from the Mexican monastery libraries. And his brand and some of these branded books are still on display in the rare and historical collections.
Something about fire and paper goes so well together. Branding a book.
Yeah.
He really thought that one out.
His time at the library came to an end in 1910 after giving himself a nice raise and pension.
Of course.
Because
he could.
Yeah, he could. And he was just generally spending too much of the library's money, so they got rid of him.
So glad those nice women stepped aside so this guy could come in and give himself a raise.
Yeah. Everything you think that a man would do in charge, he did.
And he walked from Ohio to do it.
He walked all the way from the great state of Ohio.
I wonder if that's how he won the position, was that dare. I dare you. You'll get a seat. You'll get
you
the library.
walk from Ohio to Los Angeles, I will give you the library. Okay. After Lummis came Perd B. Wright.
Purdy.
From 1910 to 1911, and he didn't seem to really do much. So after Perd B. Wright, from 1910 to 1911, came the hugely significant figure Everett Perry, from 1911 to 1933, which so far was the longest. That's a really long term.
Yeah.
And Perry was a very thrifty man, and under his leadership, and also the $210,000 donated to the LAPL by the Andrew Carnegie Foundation. Carnegie. With that, he grew the library collection from 166,000 volumes when he started to over 1,400,000 when he left. And he also, in his time, the system expanded to 48 branches. The interlibrary loan department was started in 1919 under him by a librarian named Blanche Herzog. And the first African-American librarian in California was hired during his time, which is Miriam Matthews, who later went on to pioneer what is now known as Black History Month.
Okay.
And she has a library named after her in this system also. So this is also the time that the library made its final relocations.
Mm-hmm.
First moving to the 4 upper floors of the Metropolitan Office Building at 5th and Broadway in 1914. And then, here it comes, after buying the land on the site of the old State Normal School, which was the forerunner of UCLA, they bought it for $1 to the location that it's now at in 1926 this happened. And they thought that the location wasn't grand enough for the library, but who could argue with that price?
Yeah, it really. They paid in quarters.
They just threw it at
Hey, whatever, I didn't even count.
So in 1918, the library's take of taxable property was increased to 5 mils on the dollar. But to get proper funding to help save the library system and get the central library built at this time, there were several bond measures that were passed thanks to Perry. And the first one was in 1921 that would bring in $2.5 million to build the central building and help build new branches. And the strategy for this one was to pretty much guilt voters into passing it by having campaigns that were like, grow up, Los Angeles.
I've heard that.
Like, own your library system. Take place with the progressive cities of the world.
People probably only respond when they're getting yelled at.
Yep. They only know guilt. The second bond measure was in 1923 for $0.5 million. Right. And then in 1925 for another $0.5 million. In 1925, also the library's tax share was increased to 7 mils on the dollar. And on May 3rd of that year, the cornerstone of the new Central Library building was laid. Just to sum up where we are at this point, in 1926, there were 643,777 books, an annual circulation of 5,521,889, 45 branches and sub-branches, 72 deposit stations, 231,799 registered borrowers. And from then on, the library continued to grow and expand. New branches were formed. Let's talk a little bit about the design and how the Central Library was made.
Central Library was designed by an architect named Bertram G. Goodhue, and then a lot of the sculptures were done by Lee Lowry.
You know what the G stands for?
Good.
Grosvenor.
Does it really?
Yeah.
Grosvenor.
Yeah.
I think I wrote it down. I couldn't pronounce it, so I erased it. He did the Nebraska State Capitol, if I'm not mistaken, which looks a little bit similar. He was very renowned. This was his last big one. He dies 2 years before it's established. He, from what I read, was not very interested at first at doing this. As he moved further into the themes of what we would see now, got very into it, and it was his last great work, he called it.
He also designed the Caltech campus.
I didn't know
that really cool looking campus.
Yeah, it is cool.
It's very cool. And I know you know about this. He did the Secret Wolf's Head Society and the Skull and Bones and Scroll and Key, all at Yale.
At Yale, yeah.
Yeah.
That article that we were reading about that from, if you got it from the same article, claims a lot of the stuff is a cult symbolism of the Central Library, which I can't get on too much on board with, although it is very occulty.
But not in the sort of
conspiracy way.
Yeah, not in a conspiracy way. In a light. A legitimate occult.
Just stealing a bunch of different themes from different motifs from different cultures. Yeah, it's very big on Egyptian and Mediterranean revival. They call it revival architecture. The sculptures inside are really beautiful. Something that I read from Lowry, which I thought was really interesting, was he said a lot of it he didn't want to just do something and then install it. He wanted to grow organically. So like the apex at the top, the tower. Is sculpted. They built it, and he sculpted down from that. Right. Yeah, and there's something else. The four statues at the doorways. He sculpted from that. He wanted it to grow organically. He wanted to be part of the building, something that could. So be like it was just
the library is one giant block, and he just carving it out.
Yeah, he carved it out.
The library was one giant block. Right? He just shipped in one giant block.
They let him at it.
Make us a library. The sculptor.
Yes.
Lowry, right?
Yeah, Lowry.
He is also the guy who did all those murals and sculptures at Rockefeller Center, like the guy holding the thing, and the thing doing the stuff.
Another one. Yeah, the theme of the library is illumination through the light of learning, which is you see through a lot of symbolism. The torch at the thing is passing the torch of enlightenment or knowledge. Yeah, and then they have the four great seers of literature. It's Shakespeare, and I believe it's Goethe, Homer and Milton, Plato and Dante and David Tonto. Yeah, and there's just a lot of beautiful sculptures.
Yeah.
They have the gold globe pendant, which I like, which has the zodiac symbols around it. It's hanging, I believe, on the second floor in the big room. The big room, with the murals.
And it weighs 1 ton.
1 ton.
And it's that globe and the zodiac around it is part of like a greater model of the whole solar system, which sort of stretches up on the chain and then up onto the ceiling.
Oh, really?
And during World War II, it was lowered to the ground in case the city was bombed unexpectedly. It would be saved.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Reading that article, they had something really funny. They said if the fire department went through, it wouldn't have passed the code for building the place, which is funny for a different reason.
We'll find out.
But they also mentioned that a lot of the murals and sculptures can be easily exited if need be. Like if this place was demolished, if because California earthquakes is like a reality, like, and so you have to like take planning. So a lot of it feels like it can be moved quickly. The murals are actually painted on canvases, which can be taken down. The sculptures. Not all the sculptures, but the sculptures on the second wing, the sphinxes
made of black Belgian marble. They represent the mysteries of knowledge.
Beautiful stuff, though. If you get really up close to it,
yeah.
It was,
and you can't. You can.
This was stuff that I saw every day. Not every day, but when I was in high school, I'd see it all the time, and I didn't care at all about it. I just walk right past it. But now that I'm a little bit more mature, I stop and appreciate it all. Especially the glow pendant. I think it's beautiful.
Yeah, it's really nice.
Yeah.
On the panels on the outside, carved along the walls, they have like little scenes from different stories. Like they have a scene from Arabian Nights and Alice in Wonderland.
And I think they have either Robin Hood or Peter Pan. Yeah, they have it in the courtyard, and I never noticed it until I read the articles. And I went.
I didn't know. And then they have like on those steps, they have like binary things, and they have like little equations and like letters in all different languages.
Yeah, there's a book on it apparently called Spines, I believe. And it's just all the stuff that happens in the courtyard, because it's a lot of little things going on all through. Because it's a big courtyard.
Yeah. The inscription above one of the entrances reads, "In the world of affairs, we live in our age. In books, we live in all ages."
I like that.
Yeah.
Is it attached to anybody?
I said that. I carved it in.
But again, it was form over function, really. It was a beautiful building that didn't serve the purposes of a library that well. And then they get the chance. Eventually, they're planning to revamp it, and then they suddenly have a tragic chance to go about it.
Before we get into that, just to button up the design, it was opened July 6th, 1926. Formal dedication ceremony, July 15th. The total cost was $2,300,000.
Can we also mention the date that the Central Library opened?
That is the date.
April 2nd? Or April 29th, did you say it?
No, July 6th.
Oh. What happened on April 29th where we're debating if it was the Chernobyl disaster?
Oh, you'll find out.
Oh, that's right. It's something else.
Yep.
I'm getting all mixed up here.
Yeah.
By 1950, the facility, which we're talking about, Central Library, was referred to as antiquated. A lot of people laughed at it. There's an article, I believe it's in the late 60s, where they call Central Library campy. That can't be Tony's look. And they don't really know what to do with it. It's a space that, I guess around the time libraries weren't as useful to people. There was a writer, LA writer named John D. Weaver. He wrote The Brownsville Raid. He did that in 1970, and it led to the exoneration of 167 black soldiers who had been discharged without honor the 64 years earlier. He was trying to lead a movement where they decentralized Central Library, and they moved and dispersed the books throughout the city, and they kind of just did something different with the space. But I don't think there was a lot of talk of doing something different with the space. And in the 80s, I believe it was, the big plan before the big incident happened was they were trying to build 3 skyscrapers adjacent to each other. One where the U.S. Bank building was going to be, which they were going to call Library Square, and they were just going to use the space really differently. They're only going to dedicate so much space to the library, and then they're going to use the rest for commercial space. And they also wanted one where the Arco building is to be bridged to Bunker Hill, which they plan on keeping active in some way.
Yeah, they had a lot of
kooky notions.
The one I saw was that they wanted to have a ramp leading directly off the 110 freeway that went straight into the library's parking structure.
Wow.
Which is not too bad of an idea.
Not too bad idea.
The history from pretty much like the 30s on, the history of the library goes more by like a branch by branch basis. There's no sort of one history because each of them has their own history. On the LAPL websites, a lot of the specific sections for the libraries have their own little histories if you want to read those. I have a few milestones here. When Harold Lewis Hamill was in charge from 1947 to 1970, the 4 bookmobiles of the apocalypse. The 4 bookmobiles were created mostly to service the valley, which was just sort of becoming a place to live, but there weren't really libraries and people were so spaced out and they needed a way to get books to them. In 1964, the circulation surpasses 14 million. In 1973, the system-wide book and material count reaches the 4 million mark, and in 1980, the material count passes the 6 million mark.
Massive.
So from the glory day of when that opened, it kind of, things went up for the library, and then starting from like the 40s, 50s-ish, like you said, it was a slow decline until something really serious happened that jarred everybody back into
Let's
action.
get back a little bit before that happens. Just remind us that they wanted this to happen. No, they were a lot of plans to. First of all, you have the conservancy, and it becomes a monument. So there's not really a lot they want to do with the building. So they're planning to. It's the 80s, so they want to modernize it. Everything's very modern and squares and skyscrapers, and downtown is different. It's not something that it's a place of business. And it has to compete with other centralized places like Century City, Beverly Hills. Like these are places where business happens. Skyscrapers are kind of spread out throughout LA now. So this isn't the central hub of just, let's walk around downtown and admire all the beautiful things. This is the 80s where it's all business and ponytails. Yeah. And then 1986 comes around.
Well, just to set the stage for that even a little more, when the Central Library was first built, it was envisioned to hold 1 million books, but just a decade later from opening, they were lending out that many in a month. So as the decades were going on, like we said, the building was getting really dangerously crowded and dirty. There was no air conditioning. There were rats everywhere. There were bats riding the rats. And nobody really knew what to do.
Yeah. It was a big problem. Again, budget cuts. Even though they were raising money, but they planned. I believe the original plan would have cost them $2 billion to revamp it, and they were sort of building. I believe Robert McGuire and Robert Anderson were behind putting a lot of funds together.
But luckily, they didn't have to worry about any of that because on April 29th, 1986.
Maybe the same day as the Chernobyl disaster, we don't know.
Definitely not the same day as the Chernobyl disaster. At 10:52 a.m., that's when the fire alarms started. But when the fire alarms first started, nobody really cared because people pulling fire alarms in the library is like a national pastime. So it happened like every day. So people were like, again.
Yeah. But people were, because it hadn't spread that quickly, people were able to evacuate, kind of shuffling out, like who cares. But by 12:30, the fire had spread, and the department was faced with 3 major problems: the fire attack, ventilation, and salvage that protects the published works, everything, all the materials that were in danger. The ventilation division of the fire department had to use axes and sledgehammers to break all these beautiful walls of the library down and get to everything.
Since the library was so cramped and horrible and bat-filled and rat-filled, and all the old flammable books were all cramped, they were just crammed like any space like behind.
They use utility closets to keep books, like places where you should have been keeping fire extinguishers. But you put books there.
All the emergency exits were just filled with books. So it was a fire's dream. It's everything a fire could ask for.
All those old books with the paper that burned so quickly.
Yeah. It ended up taking 350 firefighters to eventually stop the blaze, which wasn't defeated completely until 6:30 p.m. that same day.
Boy.
The temperatures in some of these rooms were well over 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Right. 400,000 books were burned, and 700,000 additional books were water damaged. There was an arson fire. They had a suspect apprehended, but he was never proven to be guilty, so nobody has ever been convicted of doing this. To make things even worse, 5 months later, after that happening, another arson fire broke out. That was not solved also, but it was nowhere near as serious.
Yeah.
The silver lining on this was that it sort of united everybody to really be like, we need a library. And immediately after the fire, there were 1,700 volunteers that worked around the clock for days, packing up the water-damaged books and sending them to be frozen, which is how you prevent water damage.
In some cases.
In some cases.
Yeah.
All cases. So the books were frozen for about 3 years, just because there was nowhere to put them. Again, there's no space.
Yeah.
The main building was so severely damaged, and they kind of took up headquarters, it seems, a few blocks away, but there wasn't enough room for the whole collection.
Mm-hmm.
This is when a lot of civic leaders and just the general public started raising millions of dollars to help restore the building and correct the damages.
Two of those men, like I mentioned before, Robert McGuire and Robert Anderson, they were two, like you said, business leaders, and they pretty much led the redevelopment plan along with a guy named Ladrick Cook, who worked for ARCO, who was across the street when the library was burning down.
That's suspicious.
And another person really big on helping this out was the mayor, Tom Bradley, at the time. Was also very big at rallying a lot of private sector people together to put money towards that. One of the things that they did was they sold the air rights above Central Library, which is how the U.S. Bank Tower across the street, that's how they
I always thought that was the library when I was younger.
That now is not only the tallest skyscraper in our skyline, it's also the tallest building west of the Mississippi.
Wow.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
It was once the ARCO building. Robert McGuire sold the air rights for $51 million, and that pretty much funded the renovations that Norman, I believe, Pfeiffer took over, and he turns this three-story library into an 8-story library. He goes underground.
That addition is as deep as the original library is broad.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. That solves the space problem, and I thought they did it really great.
Yeah, they handled that.
Yeah. But if you stand on the very top floor, which is level 4, and you look all the way to lower level 4, it's incredibly deep, and it's terrifying. The new building solved the space problem. Got a lot of LA public officials involved with it.
It brought a lot of awareness to the library. They also built at the west entrance after this happened. They put up a bronze map that pinpoints all the sites of histories, book burnings, and all the great library fires throughout history.
I did not know that. Yep. Something else about Ladrick Cook that I thought was really interesting. They named the rotunda after him. He was very big on. He was an ARCO chairman. Like I said, worked across the street. Kind of a strange guy. He helped raise $10 million to aid in the redevelopment. They named the rotunda after him, and when they asked him why he did it, he's like, "Oh, because we're neighbors." You know, he was never really that. See, isn't that sweet?
Yeah,
he wasn't that.
That's weird from the ARCO chairman.
I know. I thought the same thing. Robert Anderson was very big in putting art up in the ARCO building to kind of inspire creativity in all the employees, and Mr. Cook, sold all of it. And he sells all the art pieces.
That sounds more like the ARCO chairman.
That's right. And to boost gasoline sales, started building a bunch of hamburger shops and convenience stores at company stations, which is why if you go to an ARCO gas station, they also sell hamburgers. And everyone hated him for that, basically. And he also, I read an article where he just burst out into dancing a lot, like impromptu dancing. He was knighted by Queen Elizabeth Part II.
Wait a minute. Was he American?
Yeah, he was Southern.
An American can be knighted?
That's what I read. Somewhere he was knighted by Queen Elizabeth Part II.
Part 2.
Part 2. Part 2.
The sequel.
He seemed like just a really kind of, not silly, but just kind of not the kind of guy who, like Tom Bradley was, like very serious all the time.
Yeah.
And
he was
especially
the fun uncle of the library.
fun uncle who
lived across the street. Basically, if you ever get an old water damaged book from the library, you're holding a piece of history.
I never thought
or
about
it might
that.
have been dropped in a toilet.
So where does the library? Where does the library go? What happens to Central Library once it's closed down for renovations and everything because of the fires? Where does that collection go? Does it stay there, or does it spread out?
Well, I think a lot of it went to the other branches. Just whoever had room, I guess, could take some. But a lot of it was in frozen storage for a long time, and then some of it they moved, I guess, down the street a little bit. But they really couldn't fit that much. I mean,
a lot of it was on lockdown.
There's never enough room. There's never enough room for the library.
Well, after that, I mean, the exact same day, 6 days later. Let's mention that in 1993, Central Library opens up again in October. It takes 7 years after renovations. Now, beautiful building is open again. 6 years to the exact day. Let's go from here. 6 years to the exact day of the Central Library fire. The verdict of the Rodney King beating is decided in Simi Valley, and South LA explodes with violence. So that happens. The riots, I thought was going to be much bigger, but because Central Library was closed at the time, 1992 was a year from opening, it doesn't really get touched. A lot of libraries don't get touched. Two of them have to shut down for a while. One of them is the Junipero, which was on Figueroa and I believe 42nd Street.
Yeah.
But it got attacked because it was in a shopping plaza. So they just took down everything from there. And the other one was John Muir. But both of them were housed in different places, and they both benefited because Junipero, when they moved to a bigger place, renovations decided they liked that new building a lot more, and they stayed there.
The only thing that gets libraries to get the upgrades that they need is a fire or a riot or an earthquake.
Exactly. It's disasters.
Yeah.
Disasters fighting budgets is the theme. There was an earthquake in 1987. It forced 11 branches to close, and they had to be vacated. The first one, I think, was the Robert Louis Stevenson branch, which had to close because of the Whittier Narrows earthquake. But it opened a couple of years later after renovations. Again, the renovations upgraded a lot of problems that they had there. Yeah, and after the riots, brought a lot of communities. The libraries brought a lot of communities together. That's a theme of a lot of this, is libraries bringing communities together.
Yeah.
After, let's say, the 90s, I believe I read a lot of articles about that. Now they're community centers and civic centers, and people meet to play chess and argue and make you mad as a clerk. Please talk about celebrities.
So let's talk celebrities.
Please. This is what I'm here for.
A lot of notable people, like we were talking about Teddy Roosevelt and several other people, but more recently, and not so recently, Leonardo DiCaprio donated $35,000 in 1998 to make the Leonardo DiCaprio Computer Center at the Los Feliz Library.
That's a very nice library, and it has a very nice computer center, to be honest.
Yeah. Thank you, Leonardo
Very
DiCaprio.
hard parking there, though.
God. Leonardo.
Could have used a couple extra spaces.
Aldous Huxley.
Writer of Brave New World.
Yep, he loved the LA library system. A lot of professional LA athletes have supported the LAPL. I know there's an old picture of Shaquille O'Neal holding a book saying "read." And
did you read because of after you read?
Yeah,
did you read after?
That's what drove me to read. Seeing Shaquille O'Neal read. And biggest of all for the library, for the LAPL library, was Ray Bradbury. Brad Baby. He couldn't afford college, so he went to the library instead. And he said that he graduated at age 28 from the library, and he wrote his early stories and Fahrenheit 451 on the public typewriters they used to have at the Central Library.
And you had to drop money into him, and he had to type it out. I read that. He had to type it really quickly, and then he always worried about the buzzing that came out.
That's how he got it done.
Charles Bukowski also wrote a poem about the library burning because he was a big fan of it. It was called The Burning of a Dream, and it's a sort of ode to the library and revealing window into his youth. I haven't read it because it's his longest one. I believe it's 8 pages.
No one's going to read that.
He must have really loved the library, though.
Or he loved burning the library. Back to Ray Bradbury. After his death in 2012, 5th and Flower Streets, which is right by the Central Library, was renamed the Ray Bradbury Square.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Is it still Ray Bradbury?
Yeah, it's permanently the Ray Bradbury Square.
That's great.
Yeah. And now, sort of related to celebrities, they filmed Ghostbusters in the basement of the Central Library.
And here we are, we're going to have the whole scene out. I'll be the ghost, and you be the rest of the ghost.
Anyone could film the library. There's rates posted on the website. They're kind of steep, which is kind of weird, but I mean, you could film there if you wanted to spend the money, several $100s. Now, a really recent, really serious event in library history. In 2008-2009, the library funding got severely cut, and hours got cut. The hours of all the libraries got cut down from 7 days a week to 5 for the first time in 140 years of history. And the staff was cut by 28%, and a lot of people were laid off. But Measure L, which was voted on and passed by more than a 63% vote, which still seems kind of low.
Yeah.
It set up a 4-year plan to rejuvenate the library system by bringing back the hours and the opening up on Sundays again. They would buy new materials, have more programs for the public. It increased the library's share of the existing city funds without raising taxes, and it increased the library's responsibility for its own costs. So now all the fines that they take in, the library keeps rather than that going into just the general fund.
Yeah, that's very good.
And I have the current 2013 fiscal year facts.
Let's hear it.
Here we go.
Oh, boy.
1 central library, 8 regionals, 64 branches for a total of 73 libraries. Adult literacy centers in central and 20 branch libraries. 6,400,000 books, magazines, DVDs, CDs, etc. 100 online databases, 90,400 ebooks, e-audiobooks, movies, and songs available online for free. 3 million historic images with 90,000 available online to see. 2,600 public computers.
Okay.
In 2013, there were 14,100,000 visits in the library, while there were 22,400,000 web visits. 15 million items were checked out that year. 18,700 programs were put on. And next year, 2014's budget is $123 million, and that is less than 2% of the city's budget. And there are 828 employees that work there.
And you're one of those.
I am
half of them.
Technically, I'm like 828.1.
It seems like they're on the up and up after Measure Al, which is really
yeah,
good,
they're bouncing back. They're getting bigger, and now that they're sort of their own entity, where they sort of take in their own money and they can pay for themselves, it can only get better.
There's a lot of programs right now because of the recession where they're trying to help people get jobs.
Yeah,
which is really great.
There's a lot. There's people who come in on certain days at certain libraries, and you can talk to them. They can help you make a resume and try to find listings for you.
A lot of articles written about them, like I mentioned, them being community centers now, and there being a little bit more. And I think a lot of it has to do with the recession. A lot of people are out of work, and they're kind of looking for somewhere free to get a lot of stuff done.
Yeah.
Libraries are now that, especially because there seems to be a lot, I don't want to say a lot more, but I know of in my area, Echo Park, we have Edendale, which opened up not so long ago. We have Silver Lake, we have the Echo Park branch, Central Library is close. But I seem surrounded, and over here in the valley as well, and like there's every 2 miles is another library. And they all service their own little community, and I think it's really good to have community centers like that.
I want to talk about something that's pretty cool, the rare and special collections, which is in the Central Library, because the collection stretches back to the beginning of the library, and anyone can come in and have access to look at what's going on. Some of the things they have a huge cookbook selection that they're apparently very proud of, which has a copy of the first cookbook ever to be published in Mexico.
Really?
They have the largest collection of books on bullfighting in the world.
Okay.
A lot of movie makers go to it all the time to get historic facts on stuff like how much food used to cost, because they have a really extensive collection of old restaurant menus. They have a copy of the first printed book to contain the word California.
Wow.
They have a ton of old playbills, and they have the oldest book that they have is called Rigori Moralia in Jobum, and it's from 1480. So the current state of the library, like we talked about before, they're really making use of computers rather than being killed by computers, because they have free music downloads, free current magazines you can download onto iPad and books and all that, free movies. You can watch free movies, a lot of good free movies.
They tape all their events, they put them online with podcasts, they have a really good blog. Why don't you tell me what do I need to get a library card right off the
All
bat?
you need to get a library card is to come in. You need a California ID with your current address, and you fill out a form. And if you don't have something with your current address, you could have any sort of piece of mail or bill. Just come in, and you can get a library card for free.
It's great. I like it.
And you get all of this. You get all of it.
All of this.
Just the last few things I have is that it's the 8th largest public library system in the country. And in 2001, it was voted by Mayor Richard Riordan's Library Commission for the name to be changed from the Rufus von Kleinschmidt Library to the Richard J. Riordan Central Library.
Was he a big fan of books, Richard Riordan?
No.
He was not, actually.
He hated them.
He was very casual about that being awarded to him. He was sort of like, well, I like books.
It's kind of weird.
It was a lot of... I came across a lot of articles that were sort of like, Richard Riordan, why? And they couldn't believe it. I remember that. I sound so old-timey. I remember them changing the name. I didn't know the name was ridiculous before. Mr.
Kleinschmidt.
Kleinschmidt was a USC chancellor, remember?
Yeah. He was a city library commissioner.
Hearing the history of it all the way through, it definitely has had its root in something very practical. And it's contained. It still contains that practicality.
Yeah, it's hearing it all. It's really cool. Yeah. It's a really cool thing that you can get a lot of cool free things from that you would normally pay a lot of money for.
Is it open right now?
Let's go.
I can't stress enough to people how, I don't want to say important, but how rewarding it is to get involved with libraries. Not like involved like doing volunteer, although volunteer work is good on its own. they have programs where you could read to children. You could be a docent for the central library, but just being able to just free access and everything's available to you. If something's hard to find, they have interlibrary loan.
Mm-hmm.
They make everything very accessible for people, and I think that's really important. Even as Google takes over everything and it's so easy to find answers, the library still has a librarian who will sit with you and show you where to find something. I think that's very important.
Yeah. So it's agreed that the libraries are good.
Can we high five on it?
Yeah.
Oh yeah!
Well, yeah, that's our first episode.
I hope everyone enjoyed.
I hope it wasn't too boring or rambling. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you, Greg.
Mm.
And this has been LA Meekly, catchphrase pending.